Imagine waking in pre-dawn murk on a plain so broad it seems the sky has slipped to earth, its weight pressing breath from every chest. Dew drips from spear points like cold sweat. Somewhere beyond the haze rises an invisible amphitheater of low Macedonian hills called the Heights of Philippi. But no lark dares sing its usual dawn overture this morning. Instead, you hear the guttural mutter of 50,000 legionaries swearing final oaths to Mars. And, fainter yet more dreadful, the sibilant prayers of 40,000 Romans who have come to kill them in the name of the man those legionaries martyred. This is no frontier tussle over grain tariffs. This arena has been chosen because destiny demands an altar large enough to seat a murdered dictator's shade, opposite the dagger-bearing men who struck him down. Octavian, still frail with fever but ablaze with purpose, paces before his standards, murmuring that fate itself was adopted into the Julian line when Caesar named him heir. Beside him strides Mark Antony, veteran of 100 cavalry charges, sharpening both sword and grudge. Across the plain, Marcus Junius Brutus, philosopher general, tells his officers that the Republic will be reborn by sundown, or he will follow Cato into the quiet of stoic oblivion. Every soldier on both sides knows the stakes. Whoever walks away today will define what Rome means for the next 500 years. Yet no oracle can predict whose courage, whose cleverness, or whose collapse of nerve will turn the hinge. So hearts hammer, moth quick, against rib cages as thin as parchment, while the dawn coalesces into a curtain, the gods are about to rip wide open. When Julius Caesar's body fell beneath Pompey's portico on the Ides of March 44 BC, Rome exhaled a gasp that became a hurricane. Senators spattered with dictators' blood shouted they had saved liberty, but the forum crowd saw only murder clothed in rhetoric. In the confusion, Marcus Antonius, Caesar's friend and co-consul, seized the cordon of legionaries stationed on the Capitoline. The conspirators, Brutus, Cassius, and a knot of idealists more nostalgic than pragmatic, discovered that killing one man did not revive the Republic. It merely decapitated its most effective administrator, while leaving his loyal patronage web intact. At Caesar's public funeral, Antony's eulogy lit the tinder. He lifted the blood-pierced toga, read the dead man's will that showered money on common citizens, and thundered questions that whipped plebs into rioting mobs. The liberators fled to the eastern provinces where sympathetic governors and fat treasuries might incubate their counter-revolution. Meanwhile, in Rome, a broom-handle-thin 18-year-old named Gaius Octavius arrived from Apollonia, clutching a parchment naming him Caesar's adopted son and heir. Legally, he was now Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, and the boy who had once hidden behind his mother's palanquin began courting veterans, magistrates, and the Roman mob with a precocity that startled even Antony. What followed was a year of Machiavellian chess so brutal it would make later emperors blush. Octavian purchased senatorial allies, turned Caesar's funeral games into a referendum on his inheritance, and forced the Senate to grant him imperium at 20, even as Antony tried to sideline him by seizing Cisalpine Gaul. When Antony laid siege to Mutina, the Senate cynically declared him an enemy and ordered Octavian, still officially a private citizen, to relieve the city. Octavian did, but at cost. Both consuls were slain, and the grateful Senate tried to claim his legions. Instead, he marched on Rome, parked eagles at the Milvian Bridge, and demanded a consulship. The patricians, remembering Sulla's proscriptions, yielded. Thus was born the second triumvirate. Octavian, Antony, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus granted dictatorial powers to set the state in order. Their first act was vengeance writ in fresh ink, proscriptions listing 3,000 equites and 300 senators whose estates could fund war. Cicero's severed head ornamented the rostra, a mute lesson that eloquence without legions is merely decorative. With Italy pacified and coffers swollen, the triumvirs turned eastward. Brutus and Cassius had raised 20 legions among the wealthy cities of Asia and Syria, levied fleets from Rhodes to Crete, and coined silver with the Libertas cap of Rome to brand their crusade. They styled themselves liberatores, but every denarius they struck carried the unspoken confession that they needed the same military autocracy they swore to destroy. In late 43 BC, they met at Smyrna, exchanged harsh letters with Antony, and prepared for the inevitable collision. By spring 42 BC, Octavian and Antony ferried 19 crack legions, many veterans of Caesar's Gallic and civil wars, across the Adriatic. Lepidus remained in Italy as political rearguard while his colleagues chased glory. The triumvir fleets, commanded by Agrippa and Lucius Arruntius, dodged pirate squadrons and the last Pompeian admirals lurking near Messene, then linked with supply convoys at Dyrrhachium. From there, marching east along the Via Egnatia, the legions tramped over Thracian mountains, where Alexander's ghost supposedly whispered to passing commanders. Ahead of them, Brutus and Cassius fortified two massive camps on the undulating plain west of the Macedonian city Philippi, named for Philip II, father of Alexander, conqueror of Greece. The topography favored defense. Northward, impassable swamps clogged with reed-choked streams. Southward, tidal lagoons whose stench deterred flanking. Between these natural walls ran the ancient royal road, a causeway wide enough for just a few cohorts abreast. The liberators built earthen ramparts, dug palisaded trenches, and stretched a wall from the Nia River northward to the swamps, hoping to bottle their foes and starve them. They possessed interior lines for supply via the Aegean and could choose when, or if, to fight. Yet Antony thrived on audacity, where others trusted geometry. He began throwing causeway bridges over the marshes at night, daring Cassius to respond. Octavian, stricken yet again by malarial chills, directed his wing from a litter borne by standard-bearers, a tableau of frailty cloaked in purple authority. 90,000 Romans faced 90,000 Romans beneath Macedon's October sun, but only one side could claim Caesar's laurel as both talisman and pretext. The very soil quivered under such concentrated ambition. All that remained was for the gods, or the unavoidable arithmetic of heavy infantry, to resolve whose vision of Rome would survive sunrise. Antony's scouts returned nightly with conflicting news. Sometimes Cassius seemed ready to accept open battle. Other days, watchfires dwindled, suggesting withdrawal. In truth, the liberators were split. Cassius, seasoned and pessimistic, preferred attrition. His fleet, under Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, still controlled the Ionian Sea. Grain from Egypt had not yet reached the triumvirs. The longer he delayed, the likelier famine and political backlash would gnaw Antony's morale. In truth, the liberators were split. Every council of war ended with compromise. Maintain fortifications but send cavalry to harass Antony's marsh bridges. Antony answered by staging spectacle. He marched entire cohorts along unfinished dikes in broad daylight, shields flashing like scales of some colossal serpent writhing across swamp water. Trumpeters blasted Caesar's favorite charge motif. Engineers hammered pilings audible for miles. To soldiers raised on omens, such brazen defiance bespoke either divine favor or suicidal bravado. Brutus's Thracian scouts reported that Antony's men cut the throats of white bulls each dawn, dedicating the blood to Caesar's manes. Cassius shook his head. Superstition, perhaps, yet armies fight on stories as much as rations, and Antony was feeding his legionaries a banquet of righteous rage. Meanwhile, Octavian, though fevered to the marrow, dictated dispatches reminding Italian municipalities that land confiscations for veteran colonies hinged on victory. "Fight here so your children may plow there," he urged officers to tell their men. Property promised can be a stronger tether than patriotism. At night, his physician, Antonius Musa, leached poisonous humors. At dawn, Octavian draped himself in polished breastplate and let sunlight disguise pallor. Even skeptics muttered that young Caesar carried something more than luck. The spark came almost by accident. Antony's laborers advanced so far into the marsh that Cassius feared encirclement. He ordered part of his line forward to destroy the nascent causeway. Brutus, seeing dust plumes, interpreted them as full assault and signaled his entire right to advance lest Cassius be cut off. Thus, two half-plans collided to create full war. On the northern sector, Brutus's legions, many veterans of Pompey with deep files and tight manipular cohesion, slammed into Octavian's wing. The young triumvir's tents lay directly behind the first rank. Whether he fought or fainted remains debated. But legend insists 2 centurions shielded his litter with their bodies until they fell riddled by Pila. Brutus's men broke through, sacked Octavian's camp, and captured his official scribe's notebook, later paraded as proof they had nearly killed Caesar's heir. They hauled 2 purple-bordered curule chairs as trophies, a devastating psychological blow. Yet booty can be double-edged. Soldiers weighed down by loot move slower than the vengeance they provoke. Southward, the story inverted. Antony, master of battlefield improvisation, rode at the head of Legio III, crashed into Cassius's exposed flank before it fully extended, and rolled the line as a blacksmith rolls hot iron on an anvil. Cassius's cavalry reserve attempted counterthrust but bogged in soft ground, horses screaming as legs sank to fetlock in viscous muck. Infantry collapsed toward their camp. Antony's veterans vaulted ramparts using dead bodies as stepping stones and set fire to supply wagons. Smoke curled into Cassius's command post on higher ground where he watched, horror blanching his scar-creased face. What followed may be history's cruelest miscommunication. Cassius, half-blind from ophthalmia, saw only his section burn, and messengers reporting Brutus victorious failed to reach him through chaos. Believing the day lost and capture imminent, he ordered his freedman Pindarus to plunge a Parthian dagger into his chest. The last of Pompey's great captains died not by enemy steel, but by despair's persuasion. When Brutus returned triumphant from Octavian's raided camp, he was handed Cassius's corpse. The younger liberator tore his robe yet mastered grief. He concealed the suicide, telling troops Cassius had gone ahead to secure Amphipolis. Nonetheless, the army something cold slip into its spine. Rumors travel faster than denarii. Neither side had delivered knockout. Casualties hovered around 9,000 each. The plain was littered with smashed shields, slashed throats, and shattered standards. Rain began, soaking corpses until flies rose like black mist. Octavian rebuilt his camp farther rearward and posted praetorians at every entrance, paranoid of night raids. Antony exploited chaos to extend trenches toward the enemy's wall, intent on severing Brutus from coastal supply. For 20 days, battle yielded to siegecraft. Brutus now held sole command, a burden he masked behind stoic aphorisms, yet felt in every sinew. He distributed gold aurae, praised platoons by name, and wrote Platonic essays on virtue to calm his own doubts. But shortage nibbled. The triumvir fleet under Agrippa had slipped past Ahenobarbus, raided Thasos, and now threatened grain convoys from Asia. Prices inside Brutus's camp tripled. Barley rations mixed with sawdust. Disease stalked latrine trenches. Harpies of anxiety sang around every cook fire. Did Rome itself still want the Republic? Or had the plebs grown comfortable with charismatic autocrats who tossed entertainment and cheap bread their way? Antony sensed erosion. He intensified psychological warfare. Deserters were paraded well-fed before enemy pickets, whispering of Octavian's promised amnesties. In moonlit hours, Roman trumpets sounded Caesar's favorite cavalry trumpet in minor key, haunting the plain like the dead dictator calling for retribution. Some nights, triumvir engineers catapulted weighted tablets over Brutus's wall. Wooden plaques burned with the inscription, "Ides of March are not yet done." Brutus could not wait out attrition. On 23 October, his council debated withdrawal across the Strymon to fight another year. But legionaries, embittered by hunger, clamored to finish what blood had begun. When one centurion slammed his pilum butt into the ground and shouted, "Let cowardice dig trenches! Rome conquers with steel!" the lines echoed with approval. Brutus yielded to momentum. They would fight at sunrise. Dawn crawled over the plain like a wounded lion. Both armies formed deeper lines than before, each side anchoring wings on the swamp and on broken scrub hills to south. Octavian again claimed illness and commanded from rear, but Antony's presence sufficed to stiffen morale. Brutus arrayed 17 legions opposite 19, yet his cavalry superiority, 4,000 to Antony's 2, offered hope. Trumpets brayed. The ground shook. Brutus's left advanced in checkerboard maniples, hurling Pila, then closing with Gladius. They struck Octavian's line, still weakened, and made inroads, but Octavian had planted caltrops and hidden ditch traps. Casualties mounted. Simultaneously, Brutus's right, anchored near hillocks, met Antony's main thrust. Antony's infantry fought as if possessed, chanting "Caesar, Caesar" at every sword stroke. The hillside funneled Brutus's men into tight kill boxes, where Roman scorpiones spat heavy quarrels that punched through two bodies before losing speed. Cavalry became the pivot. Brutus's horse on left initially outflanked Octavian, showering javelins into dense cohorts, but Agrippa, absent during first battle, led a surprise reserve of Iberian and Gaul Horidicetitao horse. These riders, armored in chain and armed with long spatha, crashed into the flank of Brutus's cavalry, shattering cohesion. Panic rippled. A cloud of dust and screams signaled retreat. Infantry, seeing their flank uncovered, began to edge backward. At noon, a hot sirocco swept in from Thrace, blowing dust into Brutus's faces. Standards dipped. Orders were misheard. Antony seized the moment. He pointed toward the very knoll where Cassius had died and roared, "There the tyrant lay! Finish the tyrant's dream!" His veterans punched a wedge straight through enemy center, broke into Brutus's camp, and raised crimson banners atop the palisade. Seeing their rear compromised, entire cohorts of liberators threw weapons and ran for oak copses. Brutus attempted rally, but pursuit cavalry already roamed, cutting down fugitives. By late afternoon, resistance collapsed like a sand wall under tide. Brutus, hemmed by 30 companions, withdrew to a rocky dell shaded by wild fig trees. There he confessed the cause was lost, not by cowardice, but by fortune's decree. As sunset bled across the plain, he fell upon his own sword, held steady by soldier Strato, murmuring, "Virtue, but a name." With that breath died the last serious hope that Rome might return to senatorial equality without wading through cycles of monarchy. Antony found the body next dawn, ordered purple cloak thrown over it, and granted honorable cremation. Octavian, more pragmatic, demanded Brutus's head be sent to Rome to dangle from the rostra where Cicero's had hung, a grisly bookend to the Civil War chapter. Antony secretly bribed the courier to lose the head at sea. Thus did rivalry between triumvirs flicker even amid triumph. 42,000 corpses lay rotting between the marsh and the road. Local Thracians looted sandals. Vultures feasted so fat they could scarcely fly. Antony supervised veteran burials, quoting Homer about Achilles' honor to fallen foes. Octavian paced the carnage with ledger scroll, marking estates to confiscate for his demobilizing soldiers. To disciples of the old republic, the contrast was obscene. One victor sought poetry, the other property. But together they forged the same autocracy. Within weeks, the triumvirs carved spoils. Antony would govern Rome's affluent eastern provinces, Greece, Asia, Syria, Egypt, fertile ground for his later rendezvous with Cleopatra. Octavian returned to Italy to settle 45,000 veterans, a process that ignited fresh rebellions and sowed seeds for future civil conflict with Antony himself. Lepidus, marginalized, received Africa and obscurity. No Senate decree restored libertas. Instead, the Lex Titia extended triumviral power for 5 more years, soon renewed. The forum, once humming with factional debate, now echoed with the silent obedience of citizens who had glimpsed civil war's abyss too many times to yearn for unpoliced freedom. Philippi's plain, where Philip II first tested his pike phalanx centuries earlier, thus hosted Rome's baptism into monarchy. Though neither Antony nor Octavian wore a crown, the precedent was set. Sovereign authority drawn from legions, not ballots, from exceptional personalities, not collective will. Caesar's death, intended as scalpel to excise tyranny, had become the seed that sprouted a forest of emperors. And wherever their eagles marched in subsequent centuries, dust from Philippi clung invisibly to each standard, reminder that vengeance and ambition often masquerade as justice. Stand now upon that quiet Macedonian field in imagination. The marshes have long since dried. Golden sunflowers nod where Pila once pierced flesh. A shepherd's flute drifts on wind unhindered by semaphore of legion flags. To casual tourists, the place is merely picturesque, but press your palm to the soil and feel the drumbeat residue of 84 Roman legions, deciding whether an ancient republic would remain experiment or yield to empire. Listen harder, and you may hear the whispered counsel of Brutus's ghosts challenging every generation that claims moral high ground. Beware that daggers aimed at tyranny do not carve a greater despotism in relief. Philippi teaches that ideals divorced from logistical reality wither, that narratives wield armies as surely as swords, and that revenge, however righteous, rarely stops at one act. Mark Antony's war cry of revenge for Caesar justified rivers of citizen blood. Yet within 2 decades, Octavian, rechristened Augustus, would spin a subtler narrative, that peace under one man's guidance outweighed chaotic freedom. The world accepted because Philippi had shown the cost of alternative. So when modern powers, corporate or political, invoke security to consolidate authority, remember these fields. Remember how promises of restoring order can fix disorder so tightly it never breathes again. Subscribe, strike the bell, and enlist in our legion of history seekers who refuse to let dusty scrolls fade unseen. If this tour through thunderclouds of Roman ambition stirred your curiosity, march with us further. Share this video with friends who debate liberty and power, and tell us in the comments which forgotten clash you want resurrected next. Together, we'll walk more battlefields where choices of flesh and blood humans forged the steel scaffolding beneath our own age. Tighten your sandal straps. Our next campaign is already massing on the horizon.